Section 9 of Schopenhauer's Counsels and Maxims is about self-sufficiency. It's a very long section, so this is going to be a long video. Schopenhauer in this video talks about the relation between self-sufficiency and happiness and why this requires solitude, withdrawal from society, especially for the person with great natural gifts. He talks about the difference between natural differences and social differences that are imposed upon us. He goes on at great length about the evils of society and the empty souls who inhabit it. He gives a very good metaphor in the middle of this section, comparing society to a symphony of horns and the exceptional individual to a soloist on the stage. That's very good. Watch for that. And he ends with some reflections upon the value of old age for self-sufficiency and solitude, and gives some advice to the young, to people who may feel the burden of society as he does, but don't yet have the consolation of old age to help them deal with it. So here's what Schopenhauer writes in section 9. To be self-sufficient, to be all in all to oneself, to want for nothing, to be able to say, omnia mea mecum porto, that is, I carry all my things with me, that is assuredly the chief qualification for happiness. Hence Aristotle's remark, hai eudaimonia ton autarkon esti, to be happy means to be self-sufficient, cannot be too often repeated. It is, at bottom, the same thought as is present in that very well-turned sentence from Shem 4, which I have prefixed as a motto to this volume. Now that sentence isn't in this copy, but I have found it elsewhere. It's le bonheur n'est pas chose aisée, il est très difficile de le trouver en nous et impossible de le trouver ailleurs. Or, happiness is not an easy thing. It is very difficult to find it within us and impossible to find it elsewhere. Schopenhauer continues. For while a man cannot reckon with certainty upon anyone but himself, the burdens and disadvantages, the dangers and annoyances which arise from having to do with others are not only countless, but unavoidable. There is no more mistaken path to happiness than worldliness, revelry, high life. For the whole object of it is to transform our miserable existence into a succession of joys, delights, and pleasures, a process which cannot fail to result in disappointment and delusion, on a par, in this respect, with its obligato accompaniment, the interchange of lies. Footnote. As our body is concealed by the clothes we wear, so our mind is veiled in lies. The veil is always there, and it is only through it that we can sometimes guess at what a man really thinks, just as from his clothes we arrive at the general shape of his body. I think this is fascinating that Schopenhauer associates society with lies. There's a kind of a clothing or a veil which stands between us and every other person, and the truth that this is high living, revelry, the pursuit of pleasure, and social living. All of this involves us in lies, which presumably we can escape from by remaining self-sufficient in ourselves, by remaining solitary. Schopenhauer continues, all society necessarily involves, as the first condition of its existence, mutual accommodation and restraint on the part of its members. This means that the larger it is, the more insipid will be its tone. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free. Constraint is always present in society, like a companion of whom there is no riddance, and in proportion to the greatness of a man's individuality, it will be hard for him to bear the sacrifices which all intercourse with others demands. Solitude will be welcomed or endured or avoided according as a man's personal value is large or small. The wretch feeling when he is alone the whole burden of his misery, the great intellect delighting in its greatness, and everyone, in short, being just what he is. Fantastic paragraph there. Each person is most himself, most what he truly is, for good or for ill, when he is completely alone, when he doesn't lose himself in chatter, in social relation, and all of the lies that involves. Okay. We would expect then that the wretched would be much more sociable, much more inclined to be sociable as a relief from their misery than the great man, who would find going into society to be kind of a burden or a descent from the mountaintop, to use a kind of Zarathustrian term. So Schopenhauer continues. Further, if a man stands high in nature's lists, it is natural and inevitable that he should feel solitary. It will be an advantage to him if his surroundings do not interfere with this feeling. For if he has to see a great deal of other people who are not of like character with himself, they will exercise a disturbing influence upon him, adverse to his peace of mind. They will rob him, in fact, of himself, and give him nothing to compensate for the loss. But while nature sets very wide differences between man and man, in respect both of morality and of intellect, society disregards and effaces them. Or rather, it sets up artificial differences in their stead, gradations of rank and position, which are very often diametrically opposed to those which nature establishes. The result of this arrangement is to elevate those whom nature has placed low, and to depress the few who stand high. These latter, then, usually withdraw from society, where, as soon as it is at all numerous, vulgarity reigns supreme. Okay. I can kind of see where Nietzsche got some of these ideas from in Schopenhauer, yes. What offends a great intellect in society is the equality of rights, leading to equality of pretensions, which everyone enjoys, while at the same time inequality of capacity means a corresponding disparity of social power. So-called good society recognizes every kind of claim but that of intellect, which is a contraband article, and people are expected to exhibit an unlimited amount of patience towards every form of folly and stupidity, perversity and dullness, whilst personal merit has to beg pardon, as it were, for being present, or else conceal itself altogether. Intellectual superiority offends by its very existence without any desire to do so. The worst of what is called good society is not only that it offers us the companionship of people who are unable to win either our praise or our affection, but that it does not allow of our being that which we naturally are. It compels us, for the sake of harmony, to shrivel up, or even alter our shape altogether. Intellectual conversation, whether grave or humorous, is only fit for intellectual society. It is downright abhorrent to ordinary people, to please whom it is absolutely necessary to be commonplace and dull. This demands an act of severe self-denial. We have to forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to become like other people. No doubt their company may be set down against our loss in this respect, but the more man is worth, the more he will find that what he gains does not cover what he loses, and that the balance is on the debit side of the account. For the people with whom he deals are generally bankrupt. That is to say, there is nothing to be got from their society which can compensate either for its boredom, annoyance, and disagreeableness, or for the self-denial which it renders necessary. Accordingly, most society is so constituted as to offer a good profit to anyone who will exchange it for solitude. That's a great paragraph, another great paragraph. I love the line, what was this? People who are unable to win either our praise or our affection. It's a nice turn of phrase. And the image of having to conduct commerce at a loss, losing 3/4 of ourselves by entering society, or getting the compensation of people's company, but at the sacrifice of a far greater good of our own peace of mind, so that we are the loser in every social interchange, which we lose money. The more we do, the more we lose. Okay, back to Schopenhauer. Nor is this all. By way of providing a substitute for real, intellectual, superiority, which is seldom to be met with, and intolerable when it is found, society has capriciously adopted a false kind of superiority, conventional in its character, and resting upon arbitrary principles, a tradition, as it were, handed down in higher circles, and, like a password, subject to alteration. I refer to bon ton fashion. Whenever this kind of superiority comes into collision with the real kind, its weakness is manifest. Moreover, the presence of good tone means the absence of good sense. No man can be in perfect accord with anyone but himself, not even with a friend or the partner of his life. Differences of individuality and temperament are always bringing in some degree of discord, though it may be a very slight one. That genuine, profound peace of mind, that perfect tranquility of soul, which, next to health, is the highest blessing the earth can give, is to be attained only in solitude, and, as a permanent mood, only in complete retirement. And then, if there is anything great and rich in the man's own self, his way of life is the happiest that may be found in this wretched world. Let me speak plainly. So I love this Schopenhauer. Right? That's about as plain as we can possibly be. The best life is the solitary life. The best sort of overall station in life is to be completely retired from society and living by yourself. Then he says, let me speak plainly. To continue, let me speak plainly. However close the bond of friendship, love, marriage, a man ultimately looks to himself, to his own welfare alone. At most, to his child's too. The less necessity there is for you to come into contact with mankind in general, in the relations, whether of business or of personal intimacy, the better off you are. Loneliness and solitude have their evils, it is true. But if you cannot feel them all at once, you can at least see where they lie. On the other hand, society is insidious in this respect, as in offering you what appears to be the pastime of pleasing social intercourse, it works great and often irreparable mischief. The young should early be trained to bear being left alone, for it is a source of happiness and peace of mind. Just the comparison here. Loneliness and solitude have their evils. They are bad, but you can see just where and how they're bad. You can prepare for it. The difficulty, he says, of society is that it is insidious, it lies, it insinuates itself. It promises you one thing and then secretly takes away from you something much more important. I can't imagine raising children on Schopenhauerian principles, teaching them to be left alone. Perhaps it can be done. It follows from this that a man is best off if he be thrown upon his own resources and can be all in all to himself. And Cicero goes so far as to say that a man who is in this condition cannot fail to be very happy. Nemo potest non beatissimus esse, qui est totus aptus ex sesse, quique in se uno ponit omnia. Or, no one can be more blessed than he who is entirely suitable for him from himself, and who puts all things in himself. The more a man has in himself, the less others can be to him. That feeling of self-sufficiency, it is that which restrains those whose personal value is in itself great riches, from such considerable sacrifices as are demanded by intercourse with the world, let alone then from actually practicing self-denial by going out of their way to seek it. Ordinary people are sociable and complaisant just from the very opposite feeling. To bear others' company is easier for them than to bear their own. Moreover, Respect is not paid in this world to that which has real merit. It is reserved for that which has none. So, retirement is at once a proof and a result of being distinguished by the possession of meritorious qualities. It will therefore show real wisdom on the part of anyone who is worth anything in himself to limit his requirements as may be necessary in order to preserve or extend his freedom, and, since a man must come into some relations with his fellow men, to admit them to his intimacy as little as possible. I have said that people are rendered sociable by their inability to endure solitude, that is to say, their own society. They become sick of themselves. It is this vacuity of soul which drives them to intercourse with others, to travels in foreign countries. Their mind is wanting in elasticity. It has no movement of its own, so that they try to give it some, by drink, for instance. How much drunkenness is due to this cause alone? They are always looking for some form of excitement, of the strongest kind they can bear, the excitement of being with people of like nature with themselves, and if they fail in this, their mind sinks by its own weight, and they fall into a grievous lethargy. Footnote. It is a well-known fact that we can more easily bear up under evils which fall upon a great many people besides ourselves. As boredom seems to be an evil of this kind, people band together to offer it a common resistance. The love of life is at bottom only the fear of death, and, in the same way, the social impulse does not rest directly upon the love of society, but upon the fear of solitude. It is not alone the charm of being in others' company that we seek, it is the dreary oppression of being alone, the monotony of their own consciousness that they would avoid. They will do anything to escape it, even tolerate bad companions, and put up with the feeling of constraint which all society involves. In this case, a very burdensome one. But if aversion to such society conquers the aversion to being alone, they become accustomed to solitude and hardened to its immediate effects. They no longer find solitude to be such a very bad thing, and settle down comfortably to it without any hankering after society. And this partly because it is only indirectly that they need others' company, and partly because they have become accustomed to the benefits of being alone. What a footnote, right? Boredom is one of those evils that falls on many people, so they band together to banish it. But the true way out is to just to become hardened to the burdens of solitude, so that you can bear up under it easily, and avoid having to tranquilize yourself with the hazards of society. Back to the main text. Such people, it may be said, possess only a small fraction of humanity in themselves, and it requires a great many of them put together to make up a fair amount of it, to attain any degree of consciousness as men. A man, in the full sense of the word, a man par excellence, does not represent a fraction, but a whole number. He is complete in himself. Ordinary society is, in this respect, very like the kind of music to be obtained from an orchestra composed solely of Russian horns. Each horn has only one note, and the music is produced by each note coming in just at the right moment. In the monotonous sound of a single horn, you have a precise illustration of the effect of most people's minds. How often there seems to be only one thought there, and no room for any other. It is easy to see why people are so bored, and also why they are so sociable, why they like to go about in crowds, why mankind is so gregarious. It is the monotony of his own nature that makes a man find solitude intolerable. Omnis stultitia laborat fastidio sui. Rather, all folly suffers from self-loathing. Folly is truly its own burden. Put a great many men together, and you will get some result, some music from your horns. A man of intellect is like an artist who gives a concert without any help from anyone else, playing on a single instrument, a piano, say, which is a little orchestra in itself. Such a man is a little world in himself, and the effect produced by various instruments together, he produces single-handed, in the unity of his own consciousness. Like the piano, he has no place in a symphony. He is a soloist and performs by himself. In solitude it may be, or, if in company with other instruments, only as a principle, or for setting the tone, as in singing. However, those who are fond of society from time to time may profit by this simile, and lay it down as a general rule that deficiency of quality in those we meet may be to some extent compensated by an increase in quantity. One man's company may be quite enough if he is clever, but where you have only ordinary people to deal with, it is advisable to have a great many of them, so that some advantage may accrue by letting them all work together, on the analogy of the horns, and may heaven grant you patience for your task. That's the image I mentioned earlier of the symphony of Russian horns, each only playing a single note. The music only comes from a combination of many of them when they're disciplined and each play only at the right time. To listen to a single Russian horn would drive you almost crazy, and that's actually the experience of people with those kind of Russian horn minds. They have only one idea and one note. It's intolerable for them to spend any amount of time just thinking their single idea. They have to go out into society. And then the man of genius, Schopenhauer says, the man of exceptional quality, like a soloist who plays the piano, who produces the effect of the entire thing out of the unity of his own consciousness. A great image and a great simile to consider, and this suggestion that perhaps if you have to deal with ordinary people, maybe you just have to do with a lot of them, and you don't have to listen to any single one of them so much that it would drive you crazy. Back to Schopenhauer. That mental vacuity and barrenness of soul to which I have alluded is responsible for another misfortune. When men of the better class form a society for promoting some noble or ideal aim, the result almost always is that the innumerable mob of humanity comes crowding in too, as it always does everywhere, like vermin, their object being to try and get rid of boredom or some other defect of their nature. And anything that will effect that they seize upon at once, without the slightest discrimination. Some of them will slip into that society or push themselves in, and then either soon destroy it altogether or alter it so much that in the end it comes to have a purpose the exact opposite of that which it had at first. Maybe here a kind of complaint about the inability to keep certain elite institutions and societies elite. Everybody comes pushing in, wanting to relieve their own boredom, their own intolerable burden of their minds by getting a piece of the action. And the suggestion here is that people of quality simply cannot keep these people out. They're like vermin, they crowd in. Okay. Schopenhauer continues. This is not the only point of view from which the social impulse may be regarded. On cold days, people manage to get some warmth by crowding together, and you can warm your mind in the same way, by bringing it into contact with others. But a man who has a great deal of intellectual warmth in himself will stand no need of such resources. I have written a little fable illustrating this. It may be found elsewhere. And this is Schopenhauer's well-known parable of the porcupines. Right? Porcupines are prickly, so but they're cold, and so when they try to come together, they prick each other, so they move apart, they get cold again, and so they find that they have to stand just close enough together that they can warm each other with their body heat, but not so close that they stab each other with their prickles. And he says that's a metaphor for society among human beings. We are flinty and prickly, but we do need each other to some degree. This is the fable of the porcupines. Okay, back to Schopenhauer. As a general rule, it may be said that a man's sociability stands very nearly in inverse ratio to his intellectual value. To say that so-and-so is very unsociable is almost tantamount to saying that he is a man of great capacity. Solitude is doubly advantageous to such a man. Firstly, it allows him to be with himself, and secondly, it prevents him being with others. An advantage of great moment, for how much constraint, annoyance, and even danger there is in all intercourse with the world. Tout notre mal, says La Bruyère, vient de ne pouvoir être seul. Or, all our trouble comes from not being able to be alone. It is really a very risky, nay, a fatal thing to be sociable, because it means contact with natures, the great majority of which are bad morally, and dull or perverse intellectually. To be unsociable is not to care about such people, and to have enough in oneself to dispense with the necessity of their company is a great piece of good fortune, because almost all our sufferings spring from having to do with other people. And that destroys the peace of mind, which, as I have said, comes next after health in the elements of happiness. Very Schopenhauerian proverb there. All of our troubles come from having to do with other people. Yeah, sort of early version of Sartre's hell is other people. Right? That's quite, this man's believing it and living it. It's his philosophy. Hell is other people. Peace of mind is impossible without a considerable amount of solitude. The cynics renounced all private property in order to attain the bliss of having nothing to trouble them. And to renounce society with the same object is the wisest thing a man can do. Bernardine de Saint-Pierre has the very excellent and pertinent remark that to be sparing in regard to food is a means of health, in regard to society, a means of tranquility. La diète d'aliments nous rend blessante du corps, et celle de l'homme la tranquillité de l'âme. The diet of food restores the health of the body, and that of men, the tranquility of the soul. To be soon on friendly or even affectionate terms with solitude is like winning a gold mine. But this is not something which everybody can do. The prime reason for social intercourse is mutual need, and as soon as that is satisfied, boredom drives people together once more. If it were not for these two reasons, a man would probably elect to remain alone, if only because solitude is the sole condition of life which gives full play to that feeling of exclusive importance which every man has in his own eyes, as if he were the only person in the world. A feeling which, in the throng and press of real life, soon shrivels up to nothing, getting at every step a painful diminutition, denial. From this point of view, it may be said that solitude is the original and natural state of man, where, like another Adam, he is as happy as his nature will allow. It's an interesting suggestion that Adam, solitary Adam, prior to the creation of Eve, is the sort of ideal perfection of the human race. He goes on. But still, had Adam no father or mother? There is another sense in which solitude is not the natural state, for at his entrance into the world, a man finds himself with parents, brothers, sisters, that is to say, in society and not alone. Accordingly, it cannot be said that the love of solitude is an original characteristic of human nature. It is rather the result of experience and reflection, and these, in their turn, depend upon the development of intellectual power and increase with the years. Speaking generally, sociability stands in inverse ratio with age. A little child raises a piteous cry of fright if it is left alone for only a few minutes, and later on, to be shut up by itself is a great punishment. Young people soon get on very friendly terms with one another, and it is only the few among them of any nobility of mind who are glad now and then to be alone. But to spend the whole day thus would be disagreeable. A grown-up man can easily do it. It is little trouble to him to be much alone, and it becomes less and less trouble as he advances in years. An old man who has outlived all his friends, and is either indifferent or dead to the pleasures of life, is in his proper element in solitude. And in individual cases, the special tendency to retirement and seclusion will always be in direct proportion to intellectual capacity. So it seems like Schopenhauer is telling us here a couple of things are inversely proportional to our sociability, our age, and our intellectual capacity. Both our sociability goes down as each of those rises. For this tendency is not, as I have said, a purely natural one. It does not come into existence as a direct need of human nature. It is rather the effect of the experience we go through, the product of reflection upon what our needs really are, proceeding more especially from the insight we attain into the wretched stuff of which most people are made. Whether you look at their morals or their intellects. The worst of it all is that in the individual, moral and intellectual shortcomings are closely connected and play into each other's hands, so that all manner of disagreeable results are obtained, which make intercourse with most people not only unpleasant, but intolerable. Hence, though the world contains many things which are thoroughly bad, the worst thing in it is society. Even Voltaire, that sociable Frenchman, was obliged to admit that there are everywhere crowds of people not worth talking to. La terre est couverte de gens qui ne méritent pas que l'on le parle. The earth is covered with people who don't deserve to be spoken to. And Petrarch gives a similar reason for wishing to be alone, that tender spirit so strong and constant in his love of seclusion. The streams, the plains, and woods know well, he says, how he has tried to escape the perverse and stupid people who have missed the way to heaven. Cercato o sempre solitaria vita, le rive, il sano e le campagna e I boschi, per fuggir quest ingegni storti e losci, che la strada del ciel hanno smarrita. That is, I have always sought a solitary life, the banks know it, and the countryside and the woods, to escape these crooked and shady minds that have lost the road to heaven. Schopenhauer continues. He pursues the same strain in that delightful book of his, De Vita Solitaria, which seems to have given Zimmermann the idea of his celebrated work on solitude. It is the secondary and indirect character of the love of seclusion, to which Chamfort alludes in the following passage, couched in his sarcastic vein. On dit quelquefois d'un homme qui vit seul et n'aime pas la société. C'est souvent comme si on disait d'un homme qu'il n'aimait pas la promenade, sous le prétexte qu'il ne se promenait pas volontiers le soir dans la forêt de Bondy. That is, it is sometimes said of a man who lives alone that he does not like society. It's often like saying of a man that he doesn't like walking under the pretext that he doesn't enjoy walking in the evening in the Bondy forest. Schopenhauer again. You will find a similar sentiment expressed by the Persian poet Sadi in his Garden of Roses. Since that time, he says, we have taken leave of society, preferring the path of seclusion, for there is safety in solitude. Angelus Silesius, a very gentle and Christian writer, confesses to the same feeling in his own mythical language. Herod, he says, is the common enemy, and when, as with Joseph, God warns us of danger, we fly from the world to solitude, Bethlehem to Egypt, or else suffering and death await us. Herodes ist ein Feind, der Joseph der Verstand, dem macht der Gott die Gefahr im Traum, in Geist bekannt, die Welt ist Bethlehem, Ägyptien Einsamkeit, floik meine Seele, floik, sonst stirbest du vor Leid. Sorry. That's roughly, Herod is the enemy to Joseph's mind. To him, God made known the danger in a dream, in spirit. The world is Bethlehem, Egypt, solitude. Fly, my soul, fly, otherwise you will die of suffering. Schopenhauer again. Just a long list of examples here, obviously. Here's another one. Giordano Bruno also declares himself a friend of seclusion. Tanti uomini, he says, che intera hanno voluto gustare vita celeste, dissero con una voce, ecce elongavi fugiens et mansi in solitudine. Many men who on earth wanted to taste heavenly life said with one voice, Behold, I fled away and remained in the desert. Those who in this world have desired a foretaste of divine life have always proclaimed with one voice, Lo, then would I wander far off, I would lodge in the wilderness. That's a quote from Psalms, from Psalm 55. And in the work from which I've already quoted, Sadi says to himself, In disgust with my friends at Damascus, I withdrew into the desert about Jerusalem, to seek the society of the beasts of the field. In short, the same thing has been said by all whom Prometheus has formed out of better clay. What pleasure could they find in the company of people with whom their only common ground is just what is lowest and least noble in their own nature, the part of them that is commonplace, trivial, and vulgar? What do they want with people who cannot rise to a higher level, and for whom nothing remains but to drag others down to theirs? For this is what they aim at. It is an aristocratic feeling that is at the bottom of this propensity to seclusion and solitude. Rascals are always sociable. More's the pity. And the chief sign that a man has any nobility in his character is the little pleasure he takes in others' company. He prefers solitude more and more, and in the course of time comes to see that, with few exceptions, the world offers no choice beyond solitude on one side and vulgarity on the other. This may sound a hard thing to say, but even Angelus Silesius, with all his Christian feelings for gentleness and love, was obliged to admit the truth of it. However painful solitude may be, he says, be careful not to be vulgar, for then you may find a desert everywhere. Die Einsamkeit ist noch, doch sei nur nicht gemein, so kannst du überall in einer Wüste sein. That is, loneliness is necessary, just don't be mean, so you can be anywhere in a desert. In other words, to the cruel and vulgar, the desert is within them. It is natural for great minds, the true teachers of humanity, to care little about the constant company of others, just as little as the schoolmaster cares for enjoining the gambols of the noisy crowd of boys which surrounds him. The mission of these great minds is to guide mankind over the sea of error to the haven of truth, to draw it forth from the dark abysses of a barbarous vulgarity up into the light of culture and refinement. Men of great intellect live in the world without really belonging to it. And so, from their earliest years, they feel that there is a perceptible difference between them and other people. But it is only gradually, with the lapse of years, that they come to a clear understanding of their position. Their intellectual isolation is then reinforced by actual seclusion in their manner of life. They let no one approach who is not, in some degree, emancipated from the prevailing vulgarity. From what has been said, it is obvious that the love of solitude is not a direct, original impulse in human nature, but rather something secondary and of gradual growth. It is the more distinguishing feature of noble minds, developed not without some conquest of natural desires, and now and then in actual opposition to the promptings of Mephistopheles, bidding you exchange a morose and soul-destroying solitude for life amongst men, for society. Even the worst, he says, will give a sense of human fellowship. Hör auf mit deinem Gram zu spielen, der wie eine Geier dir am Leben frisst. Die schlechteste Gesellschaft lässt dich fühlen, dass du ein Mensch mit Menschen bist. That is, stop playing with your grief, who like a vulture eats your life. The worst company makes you feel that you are a person with people, a man among men. To be alone is the fate of all great minds, a fate deplored at times, but still always chosen as the less grievous of two evils. As the years increase, it always becomes easier to say, dare to be wise, sapere aude. And after 60, the inclination to be alone grows into a kind of real, natural instinct. For at that age, everything combines in favor of it. The strongest impulse, the love of a woman's society, has little or no effect. It is the sexless condition of old age which lays the foundation of a certain self-sufficiency, and that gradually absorbs all desire for others' company. 1,000 illusions and follies are overcome. The active years of life are in most cases gone. A man has no more expectations or plans or intentions. The generation to which he belonged has passed away, and a new race has sprung up which looks upon him as essentially outside its sphere of activity. And then the years pass more quickly as we become older, and we want to devote our remaining time to the intellectual rather than to the practical side of life. For, provided that the mind retains its faculties, the amount of knowledge and experience we have acquired, together with the facility we have gained in the use of our powers, makes it then, more than ever, easy and interesting to us to pursue the study of any subject. 1,000 things become clear which were formerly enveloped in obscurity, and results are obtained which give a feeling of difficulties overcome. From long experience of men, we cease to expect much from them. We find that, on the whole, people do not gain by a nearer acquaintance, and that, apart from a few rare and fortunate exceptions, we have come across none but defective specimens of human nature, which it is advisable to leave in peace. We are no more subject to the ordinary illusions of life, and as in individual instances we soon see what a man is made of, we seldom feel any inclination to come into closer relations with him. Finally, isolation, our own society, has become a habit, as it were a second nature with us, more especially if we have been on friendly terms with it from our youth up. The love of solitude, which was formerly indulged only at the expense of our desire for society, has now come to be the simple quality of our natural disposition, the element proper to our life, as water to a fish. This is why anyone who possesses a unique individuality, unlike others, and therefore necessarily isolated, feels that, as he becomes older, his position is no longer so burdensome as when he was young. Okay. Quite obviously here, a kind of self-portrait of Schopenhauer, right? All the advantages that come with old age, the diminution of the passions, the ease with which one can pick up new subjects, having sort of one's full powers and experience at one's disposal, with fewer demands upon one and kind of already alienated from and outside of young men's active society. He continues, "For, as a matter of fact, this very genuine privilege of old age is one which can be enjoyed only if a man is possessed of a certain amount of intellect. It will be appreciated most of all where there is real mental power, but in some degree by everyone. It is only people of very barren and vulgar nature who will be just as sociable in their old age as they were in their youth. But then they become troublesome to a society to which they are no longer suited, and, at most, manage to be tolerated, whereas they were formerly in great request. There is another aspect of this inverse proportion between age and sociability, the way in which it conduces to education. The younger people are, the more in every respect they have to learn. And it is just in youth that nature provides a system of mutual education, so that mere intercourse with others at that time of life carries instruction with it. Human society, from this point of view, resembles a huge academy of learning on the Bell and Lancaster system, opposed to the system of education by means of books and schools as something artificial and contrary to the institutions of nature. It is therefore a very suitable arrangement that, in his young days, a man should be a very diligent student at the place of learning provided by nature herself. Now, I looked this up. The Bell and Lancaster method of schooling was a 19th century method for instructing children, especially the children of the poor, children were grouped by ability, and it was encouraged that older children should help to supervise and help to educate the younger ones. And so Schopenhauer's suggestion here is that this is what society is for the young. The young interact with each other, and by that very means, they learn. So it's appropriate somehow that nature has made the young people sociable, old people not so much. So he goes on. We're near the end of the section now. Here we go. But there is nothing in life which has not some drawback. Nihil est ab omni parte beatum. Nothing is happy on every side. As Horace says, or in the words of an Indian proverb, no lotus without a stalk. Seclusion, which has so many advantages, also has its little annoyances and drawbacks, which are small, however, in comparison with those of society. Hence, anyone who is worth much in himself will get on better without other people than with them. But amongst the disadvantages of seclusion, there is one which is not so easy to see as the rest. It is this. When people remain indoors all day, they become physically very sensitive to atmospheric changes, so that every little draught is enough to make them ill. So with our temper. A long course of seclusion makes it so sensitive that the most trivial incidents, words, or even looks are sufficient to disturb or to vex and offend us, little things which are unnoticed by those who live in the turmoil of life. In other words, living alone has the disadvantage of making you sensitive. As you might become soft or sensitive to light in your body, you become sensitive to minor annoyances. You snap at people. You might find it very, very vexing what would be sort of an ordinary price of social interaction for people who are not solitary. So again, this seems to come directly from Schopenhauer's lived experience. He goes on. When you find human society disagreeable and feel yourself justified in flying to solitude, you may be so constituted as to be unable to bear the depression of it for any length of time, which will probably be the case if you are young. Let me advise you then to form the habit of taking some of your solitude with you into society, to learn to be, to some extent, alone, even though you are in company, not to say at once what you think, and, on the other hand, not to attach too precise a meaning to what others say. Rather, not to expect much of them, either morally or intellectually, and to strengthen yourself in the feeling of indifference to their opinion, which is the surest way of always practicing a praiseworthy toleration. If you do that, you will not live so much with other people, though you may appear to move amongst them. Your relation to them will be of a purely objective character. This precaution will keep you from too close contact with society, and therefore secure you against being contaminated or even outraged by it. Footnote. This restricted, or, as it were, entrenched kind of sociability has been dramatically illustrated in a play, well worth reading, of Moratin's, entitled El Café o sea la Comedia Nueva, the Café, or the New Comedy, chiefly by one of the characters, Don Pedro, and especially in the second and third scenes of the first act. Back to the main text. Society is, in this respect, like a fire. The wise man warming himself at a proper distance from it, not coming too close, like the fool, who, on getting scorched, runs away and shivers in solitude, loud in his complaint that the fire burns. That's the end of section 9. Really interesting set of reflections upon and maybe kind of autobiographical sketches, as well as life advice from Schopenhauer about self-sufficiency, solitude, its advantages, and ending there with some advice to the young. I hope that you enjoyed it. That is all for section 9. The next video will be about section 10. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.